At 70 years old, Bruce Willis remains one of the most recognizable faces on the planet. To millions, he is the unbreakable man, the smirk, the swagger, the voice that became a symbol of American strength. People still quote his lines, still replay his scenes, still believe that somewhere inside him, the action hero who refused to die hard is still standing tall. But behind that image lies a truth the world was never prepared to face. Because while the public sees the legend, those closest to him have watched something far more fragile unfold. A transformation so painful, so slow, and so devastating that even the strongest members of his family struggled to accept it. Overnight, the man who ran through explosions, fought impossible battles, and carried entire franchises on his shoulders, began fighting a quieter enemy, one that couldn't be punched, shot at, or outsmarted. The world saw the headlines, but they never saw the moments behind them. They never saw the nights when he tried to form a sentence that wouldn't come. They never saw the look in his daughter's eyes when his once sharp wit flickered into confusion. They never saw the silent war inside his home, where love became both a shield and a reminder of how quickly everything can change. And yet, there is something even more shocking, because beneath the heartbreak, beneath the fading spotlight, and beneath the struggle with identity and memory, lies a secret about Bruce Willis's life that was never meant for the public, a truth that reshapes everything we know about his rise, his fall, and the family who refuses to let him disappear into the shadows. A truth that asks a haunting question: how do you rescue a hero when the battle is happening inside his own mind? As the world continues to cheer for the legend, his loved ones fight to protect the man, the father, the husband, the friend, whose greatest story is still unfolding, quietly and painfully, behind closed doors. And that story begins long before the diagnosis, long before the slowing speech, long before the world realized something was terribly wrong. It begins with a hidden chapter in Bruce's life that almost no one knows. And once revealed, it changes everything. The real tragedy, the one the cameras never captured, starts here. To understand the tragedy of Bruce Willis at 70, you first have to understand the myth he built. A myth so powerful, so larger than life, that it created the illusion he could survive anything. For decades, the world didn't just watch Bruce Willis. They believed in him. He wasn't just an actor. He was a cultural force, a symbol of grit, charm, rebellion, and resilience stitched into the fabric of Hollywood itself. From the moment he stepped onto the screen, Bruce didn't behave like a movie star trying to play a hero. He acted like a man who had already lived through the danger, who already bore the scars, who understood the weight of fear because he had carried it himself. People responded to that. They trusted that. He didn't look invincible. He looked human. But he also looked unstoppable. That combination made him magnetic. For fans around the world, Bruce Willis wasn't just the guy in the tank top crawling through air vents. He became the blueprint for the modern hero. Rugged, sarcastic, wounded, but fiercely determined. He could be bleeding, exhausted, outnumbered, narrowly holding on to hope, and he would still crack a joke as if pain bowed down to him. That image shaped everything. It made audiences believe Bruce would never slow down, never age, never crumble. They assumed he would remain the sharp-tongued, wise-cracking fighter who treated danger like an old friend. And when he reached his 50s and 60s, the myth only grew stronger. Most actors softened. Bruce hardened. His face earned lines. His voice deepened. His presence became heavier, more seasoned, more complex. Even when critics claimed his later films were slipping, the public didn't care. People didn't watch Bruce Willis for perfection. They watched him because he represented survival. Around the world, posters bearing his face hung in bedrooms, gyms, dorms, convenience stores, military barracks, and police stations. His expression, that familiar half-smirk, half-warning, became a symbol of bravery under pressure. Soldiers in real battlefields carried his movies with them. Firefighters watched his films before long shifts. Teenagers dealing with broken homes or tough streets used his characters as emotional armor. Bruce Willis wasn't just an actor in the public image. He was emotional protection. He was reassurance that strength didn't require perfection. He was proof that even the reluctant hero could win. This public image made him bigger than Hollywood. It made him timeless. And then there was something else, his charm. Bruce had a way of walking into a late-night interview and making it feel like he wasn't promoting anything. He seemed like the guy you'd meet at a bar who could either save your life or ruin your night with one legendary prank. That unpredictability made him beloved. He was playful, warm, sharp, mischievous, a live wire wrapped in charisma. Fans adored him. The industry respected him. Young actors envied him. Directors trusted him. And the world believed the same simple lie. Bruce Willis would always be Bruce Willis. Hollywood doesn't allow room for vulnerability in its heroes. Audiences don't allow it either. When a man becomes a symbol, people forget he is human. They forget that behind the smirk is a heartbeat. Behind the swagger is a childhood. Behind the confidence is a man who can break. And that is where the story begins to shift. Because while the public image of Bruce Willis was built on strength, endurance, and a seemingly unshakable spirit, something was happening behind that image. Something subtle. Something quiet. Something no one wanted to notice. A forgotten line. A hesitation in an interview. A scene where his eyes seemed to drift, as if reaching for a thought he couldn't quite catch. Moments so small that fans brushed them off, producers edited around them, and the public never thought twice. But not everyone could ignore it. Those who worked closest to him, the directors who watched him repeat a line, the crew members who saw him struggle with timing, the co-stars who sensed he was working harder than before just to keep up. They noticed the cracks forming long before the headlines ever appeared. Still, the myth of Bruce Willis was too strong. The world didn't want to believe he was slowing down. They wanted the action hero. They wanted the legend. They wanted yippee-ki-yay forever. And Bruce, in his own quiet way, tried to keep giving them exactly what they expected. Even as the pressure increased, even as the script simplified, even as entire roles were rewritten to make things easier, even as his family watched the public image outgrow the man who had created it. The truth is painful. The public loved Bruce Willis the icon. Even when the man behind the icon was fighting to hold on to himself, the world saw the hero. But behind the scenes, his loved ones saw something completely different. That contrast, the unbreakable image versus the fragile reality, became the great silent tension of his later years. A tension that would eventually explode into one of the most heartbreaking chapters in modern Hollywood history. Because while the world continued to cheer for the legend, Bruce Willis was slowly slipping away from the man he had always been. This is where the public image ends, and the hidden self begins. Behind every public legend sits a private story, one that rarely aligns with the image the world insists on seeing. And for Bruce Willis, the gap between the icon and the man was wider than anyone ever imagined. Beneath the swagger, beneath the confidence, beneath the movie star aura that seemed unshakable, Bruce carried layers of vulnerability that very few people ever had access to. Those who loved him knew this long before the world did. Bruce Willis was not the unbreakable hero he played. He was a man who felt deeply, worried constantly, and lived with a quiet fear of disappointing the people he cared about. He wasn't detached or carefree the way his characters seemed. If anything, he was more sensitive than most actors in his generation. He remembered small details about people. He studied faces when they talked. He carried guilt longer than necessary, and when someone he loved was hurting, he felt responsible, even if he had nothing to do with it. He lived with an internal pressure that came from wanting to be more than what the world had already decided he was. Fame gave him a spotlight, but it also gave him a cage. Being the hero meant always being expected to act like one, even in the quiet moments when he wanted to crumble, when he wanted to ask for help, when he wanted to slow down and breathe. To the public, Bruce's silence looked like strength. To his family, it often looked like a man holding something heavy inside. There were days he would sit in the corner of his home, not speaking much, just thinking. His family said it wasn't brooding, it was processing. Bruce was the type of man who carried the weight of unsaid thoughts. He wrestled with himself more than he wrestled with Hollywood. And in the moments when he wasn't performing, that internal war became clearer. He worried about aging. He worried about relevance. He worried about legacy. But above all else, he worried about his family. Bruce's love for his daughters wasn't just paternal. It was spiritual. He adored them. He admired them. He studied them the way a quiet man studies the stars. He didn't always know how to express it in long speeches. But his presence, his gestures, his easy laughter around them revealed a man whose emotional center was built on fatherhood. People assumed Bruce was distant or reserved because he wasn't overly expressive on camera outside of acting. But at home, his daughters say he could be silly, warm, unexpectedly soft, and sometimes almost childlike in the way he showed affection. They saw sides of him the world would never believe, sides that contradicted the hardened image Hollywood carefully curated. But privately, even as he loved them, he worried he wasn't giving them enough. He worried he wasn't present enough. He worried they needed more of him than his career allowed. These anxieties didn't break him, but they shaped him. They made him protective. They made him cautious. And they made him incredibly aware of how quickly life can change. Long before his diagnosis, Bruce sensed something shifting inside himself. Not a sudden loss, not a dramatic collapse, but small glitches, tiny stumbles that made him pause. A forgotten name, a misplaced phrase, a hesitation that didn't belong to a seasoned actor who had memorized hundreds of pages of dialogue for decades. He brushed them off. He joked about them. He hid them. That was Bruce, the man who would rather struggle quietly than worry the people he loved. But this wasn't the first time Bruce hid parts of himself. His entire life he had learned to compartmentalize, to be strong in public, to be vulnerable in private, to smile when the cameras were on, to retreat when they were off. He carried childhood insecurities that fame never fully erased. Growing up in a working-class family, Bruce felt the pressure to prove himself early. He was protective of his siblings, protective of his mother, protective even of his own younger self, the boy who stuttered, who doubted, who felt like he didn't belong. Most people never knew Bruce. Willis had a stutter so severe it could freeze him mid-sentence. That young boy learned to hide it, fight it, overcome it, but he never forgot how powerless it once made him feel. That memory made him compassionate. It also made him guarded. It taught him to mask vulnerability behind humor, charm, and toughness, a pattern he carried into adulthood, into fame, into fatherhood, into marriage, and eventually into the years when his mind began to betray him. Even at the height of his career, Bruce feared losing control. Not control of others, control of himself. He feared failing on set. He feared forgetting a line. He feared not living up to the man people thought he was. So when the subtle signs began creeping into his life, the pauses, the stumbles, the quiet confusion, he didn't see them as medical symptoms at first. He saw them as weakness. He saw them as a threat to the carefully balanced identity he had spent decades building. The hero who could handle anything. Inside, Bruce was terrified. But he said nothing. He kept working. He kept smiling. He kept pretending. To his family, these changes appeared gradually. Little things, barely noticeable. But slowly, the man they knew began to drift. Not dramatically, but like a familiar song losing rhythm. His wife noticed he asked the same question twice. His daughters noticed he hesitated a second longer than usual before responding. His closest friends noticed his spark, that sharpness, that quick wit he was famous for. Sometimes flickered. But Bruce, being Bruce, would laugh it off. He would shrug. He would redirect the conversation. He would act like everything was fine. Because Bruce Willis had spent a lifetime mastering the art of hiding pain. And yet behind those smiles, something was unraveling. The hidden self, the part of him the world never saw, was beginning to fracture. The man who once relied on instinct, timing, memory, and presence was wrestling with an invisible enemy that made him question his identity piece by piece. This wasn't the fall. Not yet. But it was the quiet beginning of a battle he never anticipated. The moment when Bruce Willis, the hero of millions, began to feel the ground shift beneath his own feet. His family sensed it. His friends sensed it. And deep down, Bruce sensed it too. But he would not let anyone see him break, because the hidden self of Bruce Willis was built on the belief that heroes don't fall. They endure, even when the endurance comes at a cost no one else can see. This hidden truth sets the stage for everything that comes next. Before the fame, before the movies, before the legend of Bruce Willis took shape, there was a boy who never imagined the world would one day chant his name. His beginnings were far from glamorous. They were raw, messy, unpredictable, the kind of origins that forge either a fragile spirit or an unbreakable one. Bruce's story started in a small military household where discipline was routine, silence meant peace, and stability was something earned rather than guaranteed. His father, a German-born American soldier, carried the weight of war on his shoulders, and his mother, a factory worker, carried the weight of the home. Together, they built a life that was functional, but fragile, a life where every member of the family had to learn early how to navigate chaos without breaking. For young Bruce, childhood was both a battleground and a training ground. He was born into a world that didn't make room for softness. He had to find his place, carve his voice, and hold his ground. And ironically, the first thing he struggled with was the one thing that would later define his career: speech. Bruce had a stutter so severe that it could paralyze him mid-sentence. Words would get stuck in his throat, trapping him in silence while the world moved on without him. In classrooms, he felt watched. In hallways, he felt judged. His voice, the same voice that would one day command theaters, betrayed him in the moments he needed it most. He learned early what humiliation felt like. He learned what isolation felt like. He learned what it meant to be underestimated. But instead of collapsing under those pressures, Bruce developed the quiet resilience that would later become his trademark. He learned to turn pain into fuel. He learned to use his silence as observation. And slowly, he discovered something extraordinary. When he acted, he didn't stutter. On stage, the boy who struggled to speak suddenly became someone else. Someone bold, articulate, confident. The transformation wasn't just dramatic, it was life-changing. Acting didn't just give him a voice, it gave him freedom. It gave him identity. It gave him power over something that had controlled him for years. Most people discover their passion. Bruce discovered his escape. That escape would become the foundation of his entire life. But before he ever stepped into a theater, he was just a kid in a working-class New Jersey neighborhood, where survival took many forms. He worked odd jobs, factory shifts, security gigs, bartending, anything that could help support the family and bring in a few extra dollars. These early years hardened him, sharpened him, and taught him the value of grit long before Hollywood did. And perhaps more importantly, they taught him empathy. Standing behind a bar, he learned how to read people, their moods, their lies, their hidden sadness. He learned timing, humor, presence. All the skills that would later make him magnetic on screen were quietly being built in those cramped, noisy rooms where people came to drink away their problems. Bruce watched. He listened. He studied the world. And without realizing it, he was building the emotional foundation of an actor who could make audiences believe in every word he said. His early life wasn't glamorous. It wasn't comfortable. But it sculpted the man behind the myth. The man who knew pain, who understood human struggle, who learned to fight long before he ever threw a punch on camera. And then, somewhere between the late-night bar shifts and the moments when he felt invisible, a thought began to form in him. Maybe he was meant for more. Maybe the boy who couldn't speak would someday be heard. This belief wasn't loud. It wasn't confident. It was a quiet, persistent whisper inside him, urging him forward, telling him that the world he knew was only the beginning. By the time Bruce reached adulthood, that whisper had grown loud enough to push him into acting classes, auditions, small theater gigs, anything that fed the part of him that felt alive when he performed. And even when he failed, Even when he was rejected, even when he doubted himself, he kept going. Because deep down, he knew one truth. Acting wasn't a career choice. It was survival. It was his way out. It was his way to stay whole. These origins, the stutter, the silence, the struggles, the bar rooms, the working-class grit, were not just chapters in Bruce Willis's early life. They were the forces that made him who he became. The man the world would one day call a legend was born not in Hollywood, but in the quiet battles of his youth. And those battles prepared him for everything that came next: the spark, the rise, the glory, and eventually, the tragedy that would bring the world to tears. His journey was only beginning. Every legend has a moment where the universe shifts, where an ordinary life collides with an extraordinary destiny. For Bruce Willis, that moment didn't arrive with fanfare. It didn't arrive with applause. It arrived quietly, like a door creaking open in a hallway he didn't know he was walking down. The spark began in the spaces where most people never noticed him. Smoky bars, cramped theaters, late-night auditions where the lights flickered and the chairs were half broken. Bruce wasn't chasing fame in those days. He was chasing something much simpler: a feeling. The feeling he had when he stepped on stage and became someone else. The feeling of control, of clarity, of belonging. Acting didn't just change him, it stabilized him. It gave him language when words once betrayed him. It gave him an identity when insecurity had tried to erase him. Bruce wasn't polished in those early performances. He wasn't refined, but he had something rare: presence. Even when he did nothing, people looked at him. Even when he stood still, there was an energy, a spark, a tension under the surface that made audiences lean forward without knowing why. Directors noticed. Actors noticed. Casting agents who had seen 1,000 hopefuls noticed. He wasn't the best-looking man in the room. He wasn't the most trained. He wasn't the smoothest, but he was real. And real was magnetic. The spark truly ignited when he auditioned for a small stage production, a role he barely cared about, on a night he almost skipped, for a casting director who almost didn't show up. Bruce walked in wearing a wrinkled shirt, tired from work, barely prepared. But the moment he began reading, something happened in the room. He didn't act the scene. He lived it. He didn't perform the character. He became him. The casting director later said it felt like Bruce wasn't pretending, he was confessing. And in that confession, something clicked. Someone finally saw what Bruce himself had only felt in glimpses, that there was a fire inside him powerful enough to reshape his entire life. That role didn't make him famous. It didn't change Hollywood, but it changed Bruce. It lit a fuse. From there, the universe began to align in small, almost unnoticeable ways. A friend mentioned an audition. A bartender at a place he worked introduced him to someone who knew someone in casting. A stranger in a theater lobby told him he had something special. These weren't miracles. They were stepping stones. But each one pushed him a little further, encouraged him a little more, and convinced him that the life he dreamed of wasn't as impossible as it seemed. The real spark, the one that would send his career into the stratosphere, came when he landed a role on Moonlighting. He wasn't the network's first choice. He wasn't even their second. But when he read opposite Sybil Shepherd, the chemistry was undeniable. Something electric passed between them. Something unpredictable and alive. It was the kind of moment casting directors pray for and actors rarely experience. Bruce didn't just fit into the role. He exploded inside it. His fast-talking wit, his sharp charm, his rebellious edge, everything that had been overlooked or underestimated suddenly became his superpower. Audiences were obsessed. Critics were stunned. Hollywood took notice. And most importantly, Bruce finally realized something profound. The world wasn't just ready for him. The world needed him. That spark, ignited on a television set, fueled by decades of quiet struggle, became the beginning of his ascent. But beneath the excitement, beneath the fame that was beginning to gather around him, something more personal happened. Bruce felt seen, truly seen, not as the boy who stuttered, Not as the bartender hustling for tips. Not as the young man always worried about disappointing someone. He felt seen as Bruce Willis, the actor, the talent, the force. Hollywood had billions of dollars, endless lights, and countless stars. Yet somehow it had been waiting for him, and in that realization the spark became a fire. He stepped into the spotlight not as a man chasing validation, but as a man who had finally found his place in the world. The spark wasn't luck, it wasn't chance. It was the inevitable ignition of a lifetime of buried potential. Bruce Willis was about to become a household name. He just didn't know yet how high and how hard the climb would be. Because the spark was only the beginning. The breakthrough was coming next. The breakthrough didn't arrive gently. It arrived like an explosion, loud, unexpected, and impossible to ignore. By the mid-1980s, Bruce Willis had momentum, confidence, and a spark that people could feel even through a television screen. But what happened next wasn't just career evolution, it was transformation. A shift so massive it would not only solidify his place in Hollywood, but permanently alter the landscape of modern action cinema. Until that moment, Bruce wasn't the obvious choice for a blockbuster hero. The industry had a formula, a mold, a checklist of what they believed a leading man should be. Bruce didn't fit it. He was too real, too sarcastic, too unpredictable, too human. He wasn't carved from marble. He wasn't a silent, chiseled warrior. He was the guy who talked back, made jokes, and looked like he knew life hadn't been kind to him. But he survived anyway. And maybe that, without Hollywood realizing it, was the secret ingredient they had been missing. When the script for Die Hard landed in Bruce's hands, it wasn't meant for him. The role had been offered to bigger names, safer choices, industry favorites who looked the part of a classic action hero. But something about John McClane, the reluctant cop, the flawed husband, the man fighting more with his own demons than with the terrorists, felt eerily familiar to Bruce. He wasn't just reading a character, he was reading a reflection. McClane wasn't perfect. He complained, bled, broke, limped, panicked, loved, and doubted himself. For the first time, an action hero felt like a real human being. And for the first time, audiences would meet one played by a man who felt the same. At first, no one believed in the casting. Critics mocked the idea. Studios worried the film would fail. Some predicted it would end his rising career faster than it began. But Bruce didn't care. He knew what he felt when he held that script. He knew he was meant for this role. And when the cameras rolled, something undeniable happened. Bruce didn't play John McClane. He became him. Every smirk, every cry of pain, every sarcastic one-liner delivered under pressure, it all felt authentic. He fought like a man who'd been fighting his entire life. He bled like someone who understood scars. He laughed like someone who used humor to survive darkness. And he ran barefoot across broken glass with a level of emotional truth that no action star before him had ever dared to show. The world had seen action movies, but they had never seen this kind of hero. Bruce Willis was not a bodybuilder. He was not a pristine, invincible warrior. He was a man who could break, and that made him iconic. When Die Hard released, it didn't just succeed. It detonated. Audiences were obsessed. Critics were stunned into silence. Hollywood watched, realizing a new era had begun. Bruce was catapulted from television charm to global phenomenon almost overnight. Posters with his face plastered every theater wall. His voice was quoted on every street. His smirk became world famous. And suddenly, the man who once struggled to speak became the most powerful voice in action cinema. And yet, beneath the success, something more meaningful happened. Bruce realized that for the first time in his life, he didn't have to pretend. He didn't have to act invincible. He didn't have to hide his flaws. He didn't have to escape into a character who was everything he wasn't. He could be himself, raw, flawed, sarcastic, emotional, and still be a hero. People didn't love him because he was strong. They loved him because he was vulnerable in the moment strength was required. They loved him because he fought like a man who wanted to go home, not like a machine programmed for violence. They loved him because he reminded them that broken people can be brave too. Bruce's breakthrough wasn't just becoming a star. It was becoming a symbol. A symbol that heroes come from ordinary men. A symbol that pain doesn't disqualify strength. A symbol that imperfection can be powerful. With that one role, Bruce changed everything. His phone wouldn't stop ringing. Directors begged to work with him. Studios reshaped entire franchises around his timing, his presence, his unpredictability. The action genre bent around him. Hollywood recalibrated itself. And Bruce Willis became not just a household name, but a global force. Yet with all the fame, all the money, all the explosive success, he remained the same man who once stood behind a bar, wondering if he would ever be enough. That humility made him beloved. But it also set the stage for the pressures that would quietly build as the years went on. Because with great success came greater expectations. And with greater expectations came cracks. Small at first, invisible to the world, but slowly widening beneath the surface. The breakthrough made him unstoppable. But it also began a new silent battle. One that would follow him through his crown years, through the height of his stardom, and eventually, into the heartbreak that would redefine his entire legacy. The crown years of Bruce Willis's life did not begin with a single film. They began with a shift in the world. Suddenly, everywhere you looked, billboards, magazine covers, talk shows, movie theaters, there he was, Bruce Willis. The man who once doubted whether he belonged in the spotlight had become the face that defined it. And Hollywood, a place notorious for devouring its icons as quickly as it creates them, made an exception for him. Bruce didn't just fit into the industry. He dominated it. The success of Die Hard lit a fuse that never went out. One blockbuster led to another, and soon Bruce found himself carrying films that studios built entire years around. In the 1990s, he wasn't just a star. He was a phenomenon, an anchor, a guarantee, a man whose name alone could fill theaters from Los Angeles to Tokyo. And yet, what made these crown years extraordinary wasn't just the success. It was the range. Bruce could save the world in one film, and in the next, he could sit quietly in a small room delivering a performance so delicate, so introspective, that audiences forgot he was the same man who ran through explosions. His work in Pulp Fiction, The Sixth Sense, and 12 Monkeys revealed layers most action stars never dared to explore. He wasn't afraid of vulnerability. He embraced it. He weaponized it. Bruce made silence powerful. He made stillness emotional. He made pain visible without saying a word. Directors trusted him with complex characters. Writers sculpted roles around his strengths. Audiences believed him in every genre: action, drama, sci-fi, thriller, comedy. This was the period where Bruce Willis wasn't just wearing the crown. He was the crown. His fame became global. His influence became generational. His presence became untouchable. Young actors grew up studying his delivery. Producers referenced him as shorthand for authentic hero. Late-night hosts counted on him to electrify their shows. But with that crown came weight. The more Hollywood celebrated him, the more it demanded from him. Being Bruce Willis meant appearing strong even when he was exhausted. It meant flashing confidence even when he doubted himself. It meant continuously topping his last success, as though the world believed he had endless fuel. Endless energy, endless fire, endless perfection. Bruce never complained, but inside, he could feel the pressure tightening. He was in constant demand. Filming schedules were brutal. Scripts piled up on his kitchen table. Executives called at all hours. Fans recognized him everywhere he went. He loved the work, but he rarely had time to breathe. He loved his family, but he often disappeared into sets, flights, press tours, and endless studio obligations. He was everywhere, and nowhere. The world saw the glory. His family saw the exhaustion. Bruce kept pushing. He always pushed. That was who he was. But the cracks that began forming during his hidden struggle, the ones so small they seemed insignificant, were now being stretched thin by the pressure of fame. He would lose a line here, hesitate there, forget a detail, misread a cue, and then quickly recover before anyone noticed. At least, that's what he thought. But his closest colleagues did notice. They saw the moments when he'd stare at a script for longer than usual. They saw the times he'd lean on improvisations to cover a slip. They saw the flicker of stress behind his otherwise familiar confidence. Yet Bruce's crown remained in place, and to the public, he was unshakable. The 2000s brought a second wave of success: sequels, ambitious films, experimental roles, each one a reminder that he could still command the screen like no one else. There was a maturity to him now, a gravity earned through decades of life experience. He wasn't the reckless young hero anymore. He was the seasoned warrior, the man who had seen things, survived things, and carried the emotional weight of every role with quiet authenticity. People admired him not just for his toughness, but for the humanity he brought to it. And then there was his family. His daughters were growing. His relationships were evolving. His heart was expanding in ways he hadn't expected. Bruce wasn't just a Hollywood king during these years. He was a father rediscovering joy, a husband learning patience, a man finally understanding what mattered most. These crown years were golden. They were extraordinary, but they were also fragile. Because while the world celebrated Bruce Willis the legend, Bruce Willis the man was beginning to sense something he couldn't name: a discomfort, a slipping, a quiet confusion in the background of his mind that made him pause every now and then. It didn't stop him, not yet, but it whispered to him. And that's the cruel truth of these years. The height of his power was also the earliest shadow of his fall. Bruce Willis was at the top of the world, but the world had no idea that behind the crown, something was slowly, painfully, and silently shifting. The next chapter, his price for living as Hollywood's indestructible icon, was coming. And it would break the hearts of millions. The world saw Bruce Willis as unbreakable, the man who could walk across broken glass, leap off exploding rooftops, and deliver one-liners that became part of global pop culture. But off-screen, the price of becoming that legend began sinking its teeth into him long before anyone noticed. The signs were subtle at first, too subtle for the noise of Hollywood to register. A pause before a line, a moment of searching for a word that used to come effortlessly. The crew thought he was just tired. Friends thought he was distracted. Even Bruce himself waved it off, blaming long nights, jet lag, or the endless grind of being Bruce Willis. But the truth was already there, quietly unfolding. His fame had always demanded complete sacrifice. Every script, every stunt, every world tour of press conferences left less and less room for the man behind the hero. Bruce built a life where silence rarely existed. Cameras followed him, critics dissected him, and millions projected expectations onto a persona he could never fully switch off. This pressure didn't break him, it hollowed him slowly. He was nearing his mid-50s when something shifted. On set, he would occasionally ask for lines to be shortened. Dialogue-heavy scenes became draining. The crew noticed he preferred action over speaking. They joked that Bruce was becoming a minimalist. But behind the smile, he was fighting a battle no one knew had started. The price wasn't measured in dollars or fame. It was measured in pieces of himself slipping away. In private, his family saw glimmers of the struggle: a forgotten appointment, a misheard sentence, a moment of frustration when he couldn't find a word he'd used 1,000 times. He would laugh it off. Bruce always laughed things off. But the people closest to him felt something tightening around the edges of their lives. And Hollywood unknowingly kept pushing him. Directors wanted the old Bruce. Studios wanted the blockbuster icon. Fans wanted the unshakable man with the smirk and the walk. Every expectation pressed him deeper into a character he no longer had the strength to sustain. For years, Bruce pushed himself through films that demanded more than he could comfortably give. Memorizing pages of dialogue became stressful. Scenes took longer to shoot. Sometimes he needed lines fed through an earpiece. Sometimes a co-star would quietly adjust to cover for him. It wasn't pity. It was respect. But still, the world was blind to what he was carrying. The real price of decades in the spotlight became impossible to ignore. The emotional toll landed hardest on the people who loved him, not because they saw a weakness, but because they saw a man trying desperately to hold on to the identity he had built. His daughters describe those years with a heartbreaking tenderness. A strong father who never complained, never admitted difficulty, but whose eyes sometimes revealed a quiet exhaustion. His wife, Emma, tried to shield him. She managed schedules, reduced his workload, and kept the conversations gentle. Bruce, always protective, tried to shield her. He didn't want to be a burden. He didn't want anyone to worry. The hero instinct never left him, not even as life began rewriting his story without his permission. By the time the diagnosis finally came, it wasn't a shock. It was a confirmation of fears his family had been silently holding. The word aphasia entered their lives like a storm, and later, frontotemporal dementia reshaped everything they knew about the future. But the price wasn't in the diagnosis. It was in the years leading up to it. Years Bruce fought in silence, determined to keep being the man the world believed him to be. Hollywood moved on, as Hollywood always does, but the world stopped when the announcement was made. Fans who grew up with him felt a collective ache. People realized that the man they had turned into an icon was suddenly vulnerable in a way that shattered the illusion of invincibility. But here is the deepest truth. Bruce paid the price quietly so that others wouldn't have to carry it. He kept acting to secure his family's future. He kept showing up because he didn't want to disappoint. He kept smiling because that was who he was. Even as the world unknowingly demanded more, Bruce kept giving. And yet, the most painful part wasn't what he lost. It was what he could no longer hide. The moment he stepped away from acting, the entire world finally saw the human behind the legend. And that humanity made him even greater, even stronger, even more unforgettable. The price of a lifetime of brilliance was steep, but the love surrounding him proved something even more powerful. No matter how much the world took from him, it could never take the man he truly was. Now, in the quiet chapters of his life, the world is beginning to truly understand the weight of everything Bruce carried and the extraordinary strength it took to carry it. The fall didn't happen in a single moment. It wasn't a dramatic collapse or a sudden breaking point. It was slower, quieter, and far more painful than any headline could ever capture. For Bruce Willis, the fall began in the spaces between his lines, the hesitations, the unfinished sentences, the pauses that stretched too long. But the world didn't notice. Not yet. Because Bruce had spent his entire life convincing people he was indestructible. He had been the man who outran fireballs, survived impossible odds, laughed in the face of danger. So when reality started tugging at the edges of that myth, people looked away, thinking it was nothing more than fatigue, age, or the demands of an unforgiving industry. But behind closed doors, the truth was becoming harder to ignore. Bruce started stepping out of conversations sooner than before. He attended fewer social events. He preferred the company of a few trusted friends over the chaos of Hollywood gatherings. His once razor-sharp wit, the kind that could light up an entire room, sometimes dimmed into silence. His family describes those years with a kind of gentle heartbreak, the kind you don't talk about, but you feel deeply. There were days when Bruce seemed perfectly himself, laughing, joking, full of energy. And then there were days when the world around him seemed to blur, when words slipped away faster than he could hold on to them. The man who once commanded scenes with confidence now found himself struggling to grasp a simple thought. The fall was not dramatic. It was intimate. It happened not on camera, but in the moments the camera never captured. Like the time he walked into a room and forgot why he was there, or the time he paused mid-sentence, his eyes searching for a word that refused to come, or the quiet moments when he looked at a script and felt something in him tighten. Not fear, but a silent recognition that something was slipping. Hollywood, however, noticed something was off. Directors adjusted dialogue. Co-stars gently improvised around him. Crew members whispered concerns. But Bruce kept pushing, because admitting something was wrong meant facing a truth he wasn't ready for. He wasn't just fighting a diagnosis. He was fighting the possibility of losing the identity he spent decades building. Eventually, the moment came when continuing was no longer possible. His team, people who respected him too much to stay silent, stepped in. They limited roles, reshaped scripts, selected projects that required less verbal weight. But even those adjustments couldn't stop what was unfolding. The fall became undeniable. Scripts arrived that he never opened. Meetings were scheduled, then quietly canceled. Film offers slowed, then stopped. The man who had defined an era of action cinema was now wrestling with the most unforgiving opponent of his life: time. The announcement of his retirement hit the world like a shockwave. Fans cried. Colleagues shared memories. Journalists wrote about the end of an era. But none of them saw what his family saw: the emotional weight Bruce carried in the moments before the statement went public. He wasn't afraid of stepping away from movies. He was afraid of stepping away from the world he had given everything to. This was the real fall. Not a loss of career, not a fading of fame, but a transition into a life where the spotlight no longer offered protection. The diagnosis of aphasia, and later frontotemporal dementia, became the truth the world finally faced. But for Bruce, it was simply the confirmation of what he had been silently enduring for years. The fall wasn't an ending. It was a surrender to reality, a moment when the hero had to lay down his armor. His family surrounded him. His daughters leaned closer. His wife Emma became his anchor, his shield, his guide. They created a home environment built on understanding and compassion, not fear. And in that safe space, Bruce found something unexpected: peace. The man who had lived in front of millions was now living quietly. No scripts, no schedules, no pressure. Just moments, small, meaningful moments that Hollywood never gave him time for. The fall, as painful as it was, became the doorway to a different kind of life. One where the applause was replaced by the softness of family, and the spotlight was replaced by the warmth of home. And while the world mourned the loss of the actor, the people who truly loved him learned to cherish the man. Bruce Willis fell from Hollywood's highest peak, but he landed in the arms of those who never needed him to be a hero. Just a father, a husband, a human being. The silence was unlike anything Bruce Willis had ever known. For someone who had spent decades commanding rooms, theaters and screens, silence was both unfamiliar and unbearable. It wasn't the kind of quiet he once enjoyed in the solitude of writing lines or rehearsing scripts. This silence was different. Heavy, relentless. It had weight. It had texture. It was the absence of control, the absence of the life he had meticulously built for himself. The world had watched him speak, fight, laugh, and charm for decades. But now, words no longer came easily. Thoughts that once flowed freely now stumbled and faltered. Names, memories, even jokes, the small details that defined him, slipped away like sand through his fingers. He had spent a lifetime performing, projecting strength, being the hero. But the silence stripped all of that away. And in that void, Bruce had to confront a truth he had avoided for most of his life. Vulnerability is not a choice, it is inevitable. At first, Bruce resisted. He joked to his family, made light of mistakes, and tried to maintain the illusion that nothing had changed. But the quiet moments, the pauses between conversations, the spaces in which words should have been revealed a fragility that could no longer be hidden. His daughters noticed first. They were the closest witnesses to the man he was becoming in this new phase of life. A father who could no longer articulate his thoughts fully, yet whose love was unmistakable in every gesture, every glance, every gentle touch. They saw his frustration when he couldn't recall the simplest of words. They felt the weight of his disappointment when he missed details, when he struggled with moments that had once been effortless, and they carried a grief for him that was both tender and profound. The silence didn't just affect speech. It affected Bruce's presence in the world. A man who had once dominated rooms, with his magnetism, now moved through them quietly, sometimes hesitating, sometimes withdrawn. It was a subtle retreat, almost imperceptible, yet it was devastating in its implications. Public appearances became rare. Friends reached out, but the conversations were measured, careful. Bruce, ever protective of his family and himself, chose which moments to engage in and which to retreat from. The more the world demanded of him, the more he retreated into his own private universe. And yet, in that retreat, there was a strange kind of clarity. Bruce began to recognize what truly mattered. Not the awards, not the box office, not the endless applause that had once defined him, but moments of genuine human connection, the small, intimate gestures with his wife, Emma, the laughter of his daughters, the quiet mornings that no camera could capture. In the silence, Bruce found a different kind of voice. Not one that could command millions, but one that could resonate in the hearts of those he loved. He discovered that communication didn't always require words. A touch, a smile, a shared memory. These became the language of his life. And though the silence was painful, it was also protective. It shielded him from the relentless demands of fame and allowed him to live in a world of his own making, one where vulnerability was no longer weakness but a space of authenticity. The silence, however, was not absolute. Moments of lucidity would flicker like candlelight in a dark room. A remembered joke, a clear expression of thought, a spark of recognition that reminded his family and friends of the man he had always been. The father, the husband, the friend, the hero. But these moments were fleeting, precious, and bittersweet, reminding everyone that the life Bruce had known was changing irrevocably. Through it all, his family became his lifeline. Emma, unwavering and patient, navigated each day with tenderness and determination. His daughters, devoted and perceptive, found ways to engage with him even when words failed. They developed their own languages of gestures, of shared glances, of quiet understanding. In their presence, Bruce could still connect to the world, even as it receded beyond his grasp. The silence became a paradox. It was devastating, isolating, and frightening. But it was also intimate, revealing, and profound. It stripped away the distractions, the performance, the persona, leaving only the essence of Bruce Willis, the man beneath the hero. And in that essence, in the quiet moments that passed unnoticed by the world, there was a kind of grace. A recognition that life, no matter how it unfolds, is measured not by fame or power, but by love, presence, and the connections that endure beyond words. The world may never fully understand the depth of Bruce Willis's silence. They may remember the explosions, the catchphrases, the heroic feats, but the people who truly love him know the truth. Within the silence lies the truest expression of a life well lived. Bruce's fall was complete, his silence profound, and yet, within it, a new kind of strength began to emerge, a strength that did not need the spotlight, that did not demand applause, that existed simply because of who he was and who he continued to be for the people who mattered most. The silence was no longer an enemy. It was a teacher, a mirror, a space where Bruce could exist in his entirety, stripped of expectation, yet fully human, fully present, and fully loved. For a man like Bruce Willis, the idea of return carried weight far beyond Hollywood sequels or box office numbers. It was not about reclaiming fame or stepping back into the world of cameras and scripts. This return was deeper, quieter, and infinitely more profound. It was a return to connection, to self, to the fragments of life that had been overshadowed by success, struggle, and silence. Bruce had spent decades embodying resilience, projecting strength and defying danger on screen. He had built a persona so formidable that the world could only imagine his humanity in fragments, moments between lines, glimpses in interviews or stories told by those who knew him personally. But when the diagnosis came and the silence followed, Bruce was forced to step back. Not as a public figure, not as a celebrity, not as a hero, but as a human being facing the fragility of life. The return began not with a headline, but with a conversation. His daughters, now grown and fiercely protective of the man who had always been their anchor, encouraged him to reconnect with what he had nearly lost, his presence in the lives of those he loved. At first, Bruce resisted. Retreat had become comfortable, silence a safe haven. But slowly, he began to realize that withdrawal was not survival, it was stagnation. True strength, he discovered, was not in avoiding life, but in engaging with it fully, despite limitations. He returned through small acts: a laugh shared with Emma over breakfast, a story told in bits and pieces to his daughters, punctuated with gestures and expressions when words faltered, a gentle touch, a wink, a knowing glance, communication that transcended language. These moments, intimate and profound, became Bruce's way back to life. The people around him adapted, learning to read the subtle cues, to celebrate fleeting lucidity, and to cherish every connection. Gradually, Bruce re-entered public spaces, though differently than before. No longer the relentless action star, he appeared selectively, careful, intentional, measured. Charity events, family celebrations, and advocacy for neurological research became platforms for his presence. He no longer needed the roar of applause. He thrived in the warmth of genuine recognition, where respect for his journey replaced the superficial admiration of fame. One of the most striking aspects of this return was the transformation of Bruce's relationship with his own identity. For decades, he had defined himself through performance, through physicality, through the ability to conquer every challenge. That identity, once rigid and absolute, began to soften. He discovered that legacy was not built only on accomplishments or accolades, but on the quiet, enduring impact he left on the hearts of others. His return was as much an internal revolution as it was an external re-engagement. Family became the centerpiece. Bruce spent hours revisiting memories with his daughters, recounting fragmented stories, laughing at moments he could barely remember, and expressing love in ways he had never allowed himself before. These interactions, sometimes messy, sometimes imperfect, were profound. Each pause, each stammer, each incomplete sentence became a testament to the resilience that had always defined him. The return also extended to the world of film, but in a reimagined form. Rather than chasing blockbuster roles or seeking validation, Bruce chose projects that honored his capacity, his limitations, and his humanity. Independent films, voice work, and mentoring young actors became his new avenues for expression. He found joy not in spectacle, but in substance, roles that allowed him to convey emotion authentically, without the weight of physical demands or exhaustive scripts. Bruce's presence in these projects was magnetic precisely because it was tempered by vulnerability. He no longer relied on bravado or invincibility to captivate audiences. Instead, he drew them in with authenticity, empathy, and the lived truth of a man who had faced his own fragility and emerged with grace. Every line delivered, every scene inhabited, carried the resonance of experience, hard-earned, raw, and infinitely human. The world began to see a different Bruce Willis. Not the indestructible action hero, not the smirking icon, but a man who embodied resilience in its most profound form. A man who could stumble, struggle, and yet continue with courage. A man who could confront loss, uncertainty, and limitation, and still find meaning, love, and purpose. Public reaction was transformative. Fans, inspired by his courage, offered support that transcended fandom. They shared personal stories of perseverance, of triumph over adversity, and of connection to the man whose on-screen heroics had once captivated them. Bruce became more than a celebrity. He became a symbol of enduring humanity, a reminder that strength is not the absence of struggle, but the willingness to confront it with dignity. Bruce's return also had a profound effect on those closest to him. Emma, his anchor and partner, witnessed the reawakening of the man she had always loved, but whom circumstances had forced into retreat. Their relationship deepened, shifting from the dynamic of performance and expectation to one of mutual care and shared presence. His daughters, observing their father navigate this chapter with courage, learned resilience, empathy, and the power of silent support. Mentorship became another facet of his return. Younger actors, aware of his struggles and his journey, sought his guidance, not only for craft, but for the navigation of life in the relentless glare of public scrutiny. Bruce shared lessons not just in technique, but in balance, self-care, and the quiet dignity of perseverance. In teaching, he found renewed purpose. In giving, he rediscovered himself. The return was not complete. It was ongoing, fluid, and evolving. There were days of frustration, of memory lapses, of vulnerability that could feel unbearable. But each day also contained victories, moments of clarity, connection, and presence that reminded Bruce and those around him that life, no matter the obstacles, could still be beautiful. In this period, Bruce developed a deeper understanding of what it meant to live fully. Fame had once measured his worth. Now, it was measured in laughter shared at the breakfast table, in the sparkle of recognition in his daughter's eyes, in quiet conversations that carried more weight than any red carpet event ever could. The return was also spiritual in nature. Bruce confronted the impermanence of life, the fragility of human capability, and the inevitability of change. In doing so, he cultivated patience, gratitude, and acceptance. The man who had once been defined by external validation now embraced a form of internal mastery, an understanding that life's true victories often occur in silence, in love, and in presence. Even as public appearances and creative work resumed in small, meaningful ways, Bruce remained grounded. He had learned that survival alone was not enough. Living fully, authentically, and intentionally mattered far more. The return was his reclamation, not of fame, but of self. Not of accolades, but of legacy. Not of control, but of presence. Ultimately, Bruce Willis's return is defined not by the roles he reprised or the events he attended, but by the profound, quiet courage of a man who faced his limitations head-on, embraced them, and discovered that strength exists not in defiance, but in acceptance. He returned not as the man the world expected, but as the man the world needed, a reminder that true heroism lies not in the grand gestures, but in the courage to continue, to love, and to connect, even in the face of life's most relentless challenges. The return is ongoing. Each day offers new opportunities, small victories, and moments of joy. Bruce Willis's journey demonstrates that even after fall, silence, and struggle, the human spirit can rise, not in spectacle, but in the quiet, enduring light of love, presence, and authenticity. Bruce Willis may never reclaim every line, every word, or every scene he once commanded, but he has reclaimed something far more precious: himself. Legacy is rarely measured in fame alone. It is measured in influence, in memory, in the echoes of a life that continue long after the spotlight fades. For Bruce Willis, legacy is not defined solely by the explosions, the one-liners, or the iconic roles that made him a global star. His true legacy lies in the combination of brilliance, humanity, and resilience, the qualities that shaped his journey from an uncertain young actor to one of the most beloved figures in cinematic history. Bruce Willis's legacy begins with his impact on cinema. He transformed the action genre, redefining what it meant to be a hero. Before him, action stars were often statues of perfection, invulnerable, unflinching, almost inhuman. Bruce brought humanity to heroism. He showed the world that courage could coexist with vulnerability, that strength could be intertwined with doubt, and that humor could survive even in moments of life-threatening peril. John McClane, the character that became synonymous with his name, was not just a cop battling terrorists. He was an everyman, a flawed human being who fought with grit, wit, and a deeply relatable sense of perseverance. This nuanced portrayal created a template for modern action heroes. Actors and filmmakers cite his work as inspiration. Audiences admire a hero who could bleed, falter, and still rise. Bruce's performances emphasized authenticity over perfection, proving that imperfection can be heroic. His legacy reshaped Hollywood's understanding of masculinity, strength, and relatability, leaving an indelible mark that transcends generations. Beyond the silver screen, Bruce's influence is found in the human connections he nurtured. He built deep relationships with colleagues, co-stars, directors, and crews, earning respect not only for his talent, but also for his humility, loyalty, and generosity. Tales from sets describe a man who was fiercely protective of those around him, who uplifted younger actors, and who infused every project with dedication. Even as fame demanded constant output, Bruce prioritized respect, fairness, and kindness. qualities that defined him off-camera and formed a quieter, yet equally significant part of his legacy. Family, perhaps, is the cornerstone of his lasting impact. His daughters, Emma, Rumor, Scout, and others he guided with devotion, carry forward the lessons of resilience, empathy, and love he modeled. They witnessed a father who balanced brilliance with humanity, a man who could be larger than life on screen yet tender, patient and profoundly present in private. His commitment to family, even amid the relentless pressures of fame, reinforces a legacy that is deeply personal, intimate, and enduring. Bruce's legacy also resides in his resilience. His journey has not been without tragedy, struggle, and loss. The revelation of his neurological condition reminded the world that even icons are human, that vulnerability spares no one, and that perseverance is measured not only in victories, but in grace through adversity. Bruce's response to these challenges, his courage, his openness, and the dignity with which he and his family navigated them provides a model of strength far beyond the cinematic. It teaches the world that the measure of a life is not found in accolades alone, but in how one faces the inevitable trials that life imposes. Mentorship represents another facet of his legacy. Younger actors, filmmakers, and fans have spoken of his guidance, not just as an example of craft, but as a blueprint for navigating life in the public eye. He demonstrates that success is not only achieved through talent, but maintained through integrity, humility, and the capacity to evolve. His willingness to share his experiences, the triumphs, the failures, and the private battles offers lessons that endure long after the cameras stop rolling. Even beyond personal influence, Bruce's legacy is evident in cultural memory. Generations of viewers grew up with his performances, internalizing the humor, courage, and humanity he brought to every role. From the adrenaline of Die Hard to the subtle nuance of The Sixth Sense, audiences learned that heroes could be human, flawed and lovable all at once. His characters remain archetypes not because they are perfect, but because they are real, resonant, and timeless. Bruce's return to life after the diagnosis of aphasia and frontotemporal dementia further deepens this legacy. It is a testament to the enduring human spirit, showing that strength is not confined to professional triumphs, but is reflected in love, connection, and the determination to live fully despite limitations. The world witnesses not only the man who shaped cinema, but the man who faces adversity with courage, supported by family, love, and inner resilience. This duality, legend on screen, vulnerable yet steadfast off screen, is perhaps his most remarkable contribution. The legacy of Bruce Willis is also reflected in the lessons he leaves for future generations. He demonstrates that success is not linear, that genius is inseparable from struggle, and that identity is a mosaic of both public and private selves. He embodies the truth that life's worth is found not in the applause, but in the moments of connection, presence, and authenticity. His journey teaches that even when the world sees only fame and power, the essence of a life well lived is measured in love, integrity, and perseverance. Even in the quiet moments of his later years, Bruce's legacy persists. The man who once raced through explosions and walked through fire now leaves an imprint through simpler, yet profound acts, the laughter shared with family, the gentle guidance given to friends and colleagues, the stories recounted to those who will carry his memory forward. These moments, seemingly small, are the true markers of a life that mattered. They outlast any film, any award, any headline. Bruce's influence extends beyond the screen and his family. He has inspired audiences worldwide to embrace vulnerability, courage, and authenticity. His story reminds people that true heroism is not invincibility, but resilience, not perfection, but humanity, not avoidance, but engagement with life in all its complexity. His journey teaches that the greatest achievements are not always seen, and the deepest victories are often internal. As we reflect on Bruce Willis at 70, the full spectrum of his legacy becomes clear. He is the action hero who transformed cinema. He is the father and husband who embodied love and dedication. He is the human being who faced unimaginable challenges with courage and grace. He is the mentor, the friend, and the cultural icon whose influence continues to ripple outward, touching the lives of countless individuals. His legacy is both monumental and intimate. It is written in the films that will be watched for decades, in the family bonds that will endure for generations, and in the hearts of those who have learned from his resilience, humor, and authenticity. It is a reminder that greatness is not measured by accolades alone, but by the ability to rise, to endure, and to love fully, even when life demands more than we believe we can give. Bruce Willis's life is a story of transformation, perseverance, and humanity. From a young man finding his spark in smoky bars and small stages, to a global icon redefining heroism, to a father and husband navigating life's most profound challenges, his journey is a testament to the power of resilience, love, and presence. His legacy endures not just in what he achieved, but in who he was and continues to be for the world and the people who truly know him. And while the cameras may no longer follow his every step, the impact of Bruce Willis, the humanity, the courage, the brilliance, remains. It is immortal, not because of the fame he amassed, but because of the life he lived, the love he gave, and the example he set. Bruce Willis will forever be remembered as more than an actor. He is a symbol of strength tempered by vulnerability, of greatness measured by love, and of a life lived fully, authentically, and courageously. That is the legacy that will endure long after the spotlight fades.